Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, we're going to be creating our own transferware out of thrift flips using IOD. For our first two projects, we're going to be working on these little jugs that I picked up for $2 each. I think they're probably gravy boats actually. Now obviously I loved the shape, but the color and the pattern on it was not what I was after. So I'm going to be using Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in grey, and I'm going to be applying that primer with a paintbrush there. You can see I'm just dabbing and stippling that on. I'm actually just using a chip brush. I want to create an eggshell type finish almost, and chip brushes are great for this. Now this primer is going to do two things. It's going to prime my slick surface for paint so that the paint will stick and stay there, and it will also block out that floral pattern from coming through underneath. So I'm going to work my way around the jug applying that primer, and it's going to take 2 coats. When my primer was completely dry, I took Paint Couture's Farmhouse Linen Chalk Paint. I started applying it with a small paintbrush there, again just doing a dabbing and stippling motion, and then I did actually decide to change over to a makeup sponge. I just liked the texture that this created a little bit better. I don't really want to see brush strokes. This is a ceramic piece that would look a little bit out of place. So I'm going to work my way around applying this lovely paint, and it is going to take 3 coats to get the coverage that I want. I'll obviously be repeating the same process for each of my 2 jugs. Lately, I've had a few people ask me why I bother priming my surfaces when I'm going to be using chalk paint. Chalk paint is great and it does stick to most things. However, I like the insurance of having that primer on my surface first. After my 3 coats are dry, I took IOD's new Pastiche stamp, and I am going to be using IOD's China Blue ink. I'm inking up the rose design from that particular design, and I'm going to press it down in the center but further down towards the bottom. You'll see I don't have any plastic on there. I need to be able to mold that stamp to my surface, and I'm just working in sections. I just have one hand holding the stamp in place while the other hand moves around and applies pressure in all of the different areas. Once I'm ready, I'll pull it straight up. I did miss a little spot there, but you can see I'm able to go back in and lightly press down and fix that. Next, I'm going to be using IOD's new veranda stamp. I'm inking up that beautiful large oval frame design, well, part of it, and I'm going to press that up the top around the top lip of my jug, and this is going to be almost like a border design. So I'm going to work my way around, just adding this design around the top. There's not really a right or wrong way to do this. I was just picking parts of the stamp that I liked, and I was placing them around the top lip of my jug. So if you're going to do this, it will just depend on what part of the stamp you like as to which part you will use. Now there were a few tricky angles like this one where it was a bit hard to get you guys in close to see what I'm doing, but I think you get the idea. I'm just going around the lip of the jug applying that stamp, and I am inking up in between when I run out of ink on my stamp. I don't mind if certain sections of the design are a bit broken or a bit more faded than others, because we are going for a very vintage, worn, almost chipped look. I then took the other oval frame design from the veranda stamp. I'm just inking up that top section, and I'm going to put part of that on the handle, and then you'll see I'm just sort of flipping it around and just using bits and pieces of the stamp. Again, we're not going for a perfect impression here. Once I was happy with how that looked, I then took my China Blue ink pad, and I'm just going to press it over the edge of the handle. And then I did also add the same technique around the bottom of the jug and also around the top lip of the jug. Now I only added 1 of the floral stamps. You can obviously go in and add more of those around the outside of your design. I just didn't want to overcrowd my jug. For the other jug, I took IOD's La Campagne stamp, and we're going to be using part of this bouquet design. I'm just going to ink up the top part of it. I'm going to then press it against my jug, and again, I have one hand holding the design in place while the other one moves around and applies pressure. So this is a little bit repetitive, but I really wanted you guys to see that you definitely can use these on rounded surfaces. I never have a plastic backing on the stamp when I'm doing this, because IOD stamps really do mold beautifully to curved surfaces, so you don't want anything that's going to impede that. Once I was happy with the design, I pulled it back, and if I missed any areas, I just lined the stamp up and lightly pressed down. I'm then going to take the Veranda stamp again by IOD. This is another one of the pages. I'm just going to ink up that entire little oval frame design there, because I'm just working out here exactly which parts I want to use. I did then wipe off the excess so it didn't get too messy, and then I held it up the top rim and pressed down. So again, we're going to be using this particular design as a border detail. Again, not going for perfect here. I want it to look like a vintage worn design. As you can see, while I'm stamping, I do have a paper towel roll on the left hand side, my wet wipes on the right hand side. You always want to have something to hold and brace your design as you are stamping. And here you can see I'm adding the frame design to the lip of the jug. Always try and have clean hands as well when you're doing this particular craft, because it's pretty easy to get little fingerprints on your lovely clean chalk paint. So just keep that in mind. I did actually heat set my designs as I was going so that I didn't get too much smearing happening. For the handle, I stuck with the same little frame design, and you can see I just sort of turned it around and used that ornate detail on the top section. Then I inked it up again, and then I'm just going to reposition it on the handle and sort of have that design running down the handle. Just like I did with the first jug, I'm going to use my ink pad and apply that around the top rim of the jug. I really love the beautiful border that this creates, and I also added it to the handle, and I'll also add it to the bottom rim. I heat set my ink, and then I took it outside and sealed it with Rust-Oleum's clear matte sealer. This is going to seal everything in and be a great base for our next step. When the spray sealer was dry, I took Paint Couture's Crackle Step 1, and I'm going to be applying it over the entire outside of the jug and a little bit on the inside lip section. Now, I have already sealed this with a spray sealer. I used a spray sealer for a couple of reasons. It was a little bit quicker, but also I didn't need to worry about anything smearing. I found that I had a little bit of color discoloration happening when I did this on a previous project when I just applied the crackle straight to the ink. So in sealing this, I'm going to ensure that that doesn't happen. I let that dry, and when it was sticky and tacky to the touch, I came in and applied Crackle Step 2 in exactly the same way. You'll notice that I'm doing a little bit of a cross-hatching motion in certain areas. This helps to provide some erratic cracks. I let my crackle dry for about an hour, and then I came in with Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze. I'm going to apply this glaze over the entire outside of the jug, and I'm really working it into all of those beautiful cracks that we created, and then I'm going to be using a wet wipe to pull back the excess. Now, I want a grungy look. I know that isn't for everybody. I did get a few comments on the last video that they didn't like that I'd added the glaze. Obviously, this is a step you can leave out if this is not to your taste. I, however, love anything vintage, worn, grungy. I want this to look like it's been around for a really long time, used a lot, and been a treasured family heirloom. So this glaze is going to give us that aged look. I am going to be repeating the same process on the other side, and obviously I'll also be doing this on the other jug as well. If I inspire you to try any of these Paint Couture products, I would love it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. And here's a look at our finished jugs. I love how this turned out. The IOD stamps work beautifully as transferware inspired designs. Let me know what you think of these in the comments. For our second project, we're going to be working on this smaller jug. I'm going to be priming it just like we did with the first project with Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in grey, and I'm going to be applying 2 coats. Once the primer was completely dry, I then took Paint Couture's Farmhouse Linen Chalk Paint, just like we did with the first project. I'm applying it with the makeup sponge and a small artist brush, and again, it's going to be 3 coats to get that coverage that I want. Once my paint was completely dry, I took IOD's Pastiche stamp again, and we're going to be using this smaller floral design. I'm going to ink it up with a custom green mix that I made out of IOD's new grass ink and a couple of drops of the black permanent ink. And I am going to be positioning that in the center of our little jug there, and it's going to be the focal point of our design. So again, I'm just pressing down with one hand, applying pressure with the other and moving it around and just going really slowly, and then once I'm happy with that, I will lift that stamp design straight up. Next, I'm going to be using that same oval stamp that we used from the veranda stamp. I'm just using part of it. We're going to position it up the top and then press down. I'm then going to move the stamp along and press down a few more times until I'm happy with the look. I pressed down a few more times around the upper rim section, and then I took my green ink pad and I'm just going to dab that around the top rim of our little jug. I'm keeping it pretty simple with this particular design. I don't want to go overboard. I'm also going to use that same section of the oval frame down the bottom as well. I'm adding a little bit of that ink around the bottom rim of the jug, and then I am also going to be adding it to the handle. I'm then also going to take that same part of the oval stamp and just do a few little impressions around the spout of our jug. I heat set the ink, sealed it with a spray sealer, and then I came in with Paint Couture's Crackle Step 1, and I'm just going to be applying it around the entire outside of the jug and a little bit on the inner lip. I then let this dry, and then when it was sticky and tacky to the touch, I came in with Step 2 and just applied it in the exact same manner. I then let this dry for about an hour. I then took Paint Couture's Light Brown Sugar Glaze, and I'm going to be applying it over the entire outside of our little jug. This is going to be a much more subtle look than the first two that we worked on. Light Brown Sugar is obviously a lot lighter than that first glaze, and I am taking off a little bit more with the wet wipe here. We want to keep it really subtle. Those cracks are going to be a little bit more faint than in the first two, but that's okay. Obviously, our antiques and things don't age in exactly the same way, so this is just going to provide a little bit of variety. And here's a look at our little mini creamer. I think this turned out really sweet. It is a simpler design, but I hope that it's inspired you to try something similar. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. For my final project, I'm going to be working on this little metal tray. I'm going to prime it with Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in grey first. Again, I'm just applying it with a chip brush, and it's going to take 2 coats to make sure that our surface is properly primed. When my primer was dry, I took Paint Couture's Farmhouse Linen, just like we did in the other few projects, and I'm going to be applying it over the entire tray. Again, it is going to take 3 coats to get the coverage that I want. I tried to keep my colors pretty similar because I did want this to look like a bit of a cohesive collection. When my paint was dry, I took this lovely cow design from IOD's La Campagne stamp. It's going to go in the center. I'm going to ink it up with IOD's China Blue ink. We're switching back to that one again, and I'm going to press that down in the center. I did keep the backing on this particular stamp as we are working on a flat surface. I then took IOD's Veranda stamp, and I'm going to be working with the 2 larger floral designs. I'm going to ink them up. I'm going to position them on an angle and then press down. Now I am working over the top of quite a few curves here, so we're not going to get a perfect impression. I did work hard to really press that design into all of those different grooves and curves, but again, it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. It will just fit in with our vintage and worn look. I added the same stamp on the left-hand side there, again just sort of continuing that pattern around, and then after that I did actually ink up the other design that matches it, but the flowers are facing in the opposite direction, and I positioned that up the top and pressed down, just mimicking what we did on the left hand side. Ultimately, what I want to do is frame out this lovely cow. I've seen that on a lot of Transferware platters, and I really wanted to recreate that look. I then flipped the tray upside down and repeated the same process as we did up the top, but down the bottom. I then took my China Blue ink pad and I ran it around the top edge of our tray. I heat set my ink with a hairdryer, and then I took it outside and sealed it with Rust-Oleum's Clear Matte Sealer. I then came in with Paint Couture's Crackle Step 1, and I'm going to apply it over the entire tray. I am also doing some cross hatching here and there as well. I then let this dry for about 30 minutes. It did then become sticky and tacky to the touch, and then I came in with Crackle Step 2 and applied it in the exact same way. Again, we're going for a very vintage look, and from a lot of the photos that I've seen, the Transferware that I really love has a lot of crazing, and that's exactly what I'm trying to recreate here. After about an hour, I came in with Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze. I'm going to apply the glaze over the entire tray, and again, if this look isn't for you, just leave this particular step out. So I'm going to cover the entire tray, and then once I'm happy with the coverage and I can see a lot of that crackle that we created, I'm going to take a wet wipe and start pulling that glaze back. Sometimes I'm dabbing, sometimes I'm swiping it away. Once my wet wipe becomes too dirty, I do change to a new one so that I can wipe back more of that product. And at times I also use a paper towel as well. How much you take back will be up to you. I still want to be able to see a lot of that lovely crackle so we can get that crazing look. But again, up to you and how crackled you want it to look. If you don't have access to crackle, IOD do have a stamp called the Vintage Textures stamp, and there is a crackle design in that pack that you could use instead. And here's a look at our final project. I love how this turned out. Those stamps work beautifully together, and I really feel like that crackle finishes it off perfectly. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video and that it's inspired you to use IOD stamps and Paint Couture products to create your own Transferware inspired decor. Let me know if you had a favorite project from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find most of the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.